Hello and welcome to this Construction News webinar. My name is Len Bingley and I'm the editor of Construction News. Today's webinar will focus on technology adoption and how firms in the construction sector can grasp the opportunity and build on the digital transformation that we've seen over the past year as a result of the pandemic. Many companies have seen benefits from new ways of working, new ways of collaborating, and a shift in emphasis towards more careful planning of the work they do on site. We are very grateful to technology provider Deltek for sponsoring today's webinar, which will examine some of the ways in which companies can move forward and improve their business processes. So thanks very much to Deltek for making today's event happen. We are scheduled to run for about 45 minutes this morning, but we may run on a little longer if there are lots of questions. Speaking of which, you can submit questions using the Q&A function on screen if you're watching this live. Please send those questions in as soon as they occur, and we'll try to answer as many as possible. That's probably enough preamble from me. I'm delighted to be joined today by a very knowledgeable panel of experts. They are Craig Finn from Henry Boot Construction, David Hancock from the Infrastructure and Projects Authority, Nick Nieder from Deltek, and Lydia Walpole from Costain. So over to them to introduce themselves.
And as a member of the senior management team here, I'm working with board representatives, bid teams, supply chains and clients, and we're normally sitting around the table doing business, and this human process and connectivity with people has been transformed by the pandemic. Now, while our site teams have quickly adapted to new operating procedures and continued with high levels of efficiency, office workers like me, my immediate colleagues, have had to collaborate in a new way. And this new way will continue to impact on culture, I guess, and it'll be importantly supported by a program of digital transformation, which in itself promotes the need for new and different skills. So thanks for inviting me on, Len.
Thanks very much, Craig. David, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm David Hancock. I'm the government's construction director. I chair the government construction board, where all the big departments that do large government spend on infrastructure and construction get together. I was also brought in under John Manzoni's bringing industry in, so I'm not a career civil servant. I was brought in from industry and brought in to do the BIM introduction across there under Francis Maud, working with two chief construction advisors. I now replace the construction advisors, and also sit on the steering committee for the playbook, where we're trying to drive more digital solutions across government, across our prisons, schools, hospitals, and writing into our contracts to get more digital workflows. And that's me. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks very much, David. I'm sure we'll hear more about the playbook as we go through the webinar today. And finally, Nick, if you'd like to say a few words about yourself.
Hi, my name is Nick Nieder. I'm Director of Product Management for Deltek, particularly focused around our project information technologies. I've been in the industry for over 15 years on the contracting side of activity, and then came over to product management in the last 6 years or so. Really fascinated by the interplay between technology and people to drive a project or a solution, and that's kind of where I spent most of my working life, looking at site operations and how best to support that with technology.
Thanks, Nick. Well, on with the main part of the webinar, the discussion. As I said in my introduction, the pandemic's forced many construction companies to rethink how they operate and to adopt new technologies, and we're all used to Zoom and Teams and things like that now. Craig, what do you think are the broad lessons that that companies can draw from the past year about the way they adopt technology? Do you think we're witnessing a turning point in how the industry views technology and the advantages it can bring?
Well, in terms of lessons, there's two questions. There's the lessons learned bit, and I think aside from the fact that pandemics have probably come up the leaderboard on business continuity plans, and the experience of working from home for office workers has been about individual experiences. There's been lots of positives, I think, in work-life balance, but also some downsides too. I think as an industry, we've learned that, you know, under pressure we can actually, you know, adapt very quickly given the right leadership and the right tools. And the industry has been flexible to a point. It's adapted and moved quickly to adjust to new ways of working. I think with digital technology as one of the subject matters, I think having a nimble IT and tech department or facility within a business certainly helps. And Henry Boot's IT infrastructure was thankfully mature enough to permit the change in style and tempo of working online for office workers. And I'm glad to see that, you know, the majority of our supply chains joined us in that journey. Obviously adopting best practices on site with the standard operating procedures, which for 2020 projects did have an impact on cost and program, let's be honest, as we took stock of the situation and adapted our working practices accordingly. You know, solutions based around minimizing touch points and promoting social distancing within, you know, hygiene stations, additional welfare and flex and program are, you know, the real practical and physical solutions. But on the technology piece, you know, we've been able to roll out the likes of facial recognition tech to replace biometric entry systems on sites, remote inductions for operatives hosted online. We've reduced our carbon footprint for sure and energy bills, you know, by using online engagements between individuals and teams where there's been no loss in value in being on site. 360 camera technology to minimize inspections from multiple people on built assets. But, you know, moreover, the globe has embraced online engagements. And of course, the construction industry has maximized, I think, its usage. In my role in pre-construction, we're working across teams to develop proposals, progress designs, collaborate with clients, their supply chain to reach contract. Now, we've probably adopted technology in a way that I guess somewhere between 5 years in advance of the natural evolution of our business, you know, without the pandemic. And I'm thinking in terms of online meetings, data sharing, designing and visualizations. Well, most of the off-the-shelf platforms are intuitive, requiring minimal training. The continuing evolution and lessons learned are all about etiquette, well-coordinated and well-chaired online meetings. And I think we're all building a keen understanding of what good looks like for specific situations. I think that the double whammy of pandemic and Brexit uncertainty has promoted the use of tech to get closer integration of teams at early stages in project life cycles to gain that visibility and improved cost and program certainty in what is clearly uncertain times. But Lem, on your point about the turning point, difficult to put a definitive yes or no on it, but two key observations from me. Turning point in terms of an enhanced awareness that our way of working and business models are supremely impacted, not just by local and regional issues, but by global challenges. And the only reason we've been able to endure through this last year is through the implementation and usage of digital technology. So investment in resilience is clearly key. That's now demonstrated. And secondly, I think before the pandemic, industry has had some good traction in the adoption of tech anyway. So I think this will be accelerated as we continue to recover. So for public sector procurements anyway, competitive advantage will be secured by businesses that can deliver on the aspirations of the construction playbook. Back to you, Lem.
Thanks very much, Craig. David, turning to you, I mean, I think you have a fairly unique viewpoint. What's your view on whether the industry has perhaps learned some great, valuable lessons over the past year?
So, as you say, unique viewpoint. So I was on the CLC, Construction Leadership Council, and through technology, we were able to get the site operating procedures out on the 24th of March. We were able to collaborate, and I think what it's allowed us to do is collaborate well to be able to produce these documents. And so we've got the CLC getting together, producing on the 24th of March was the first operating procedures that went out. Again, we collaborated to deliver the playbook. We started that in June and had that out by December. So it's really, in some cases, if people embrace it, allowed collaboration to happen. I've also seen the difference between where we've been using modular and MMC as part of it to deliver the prisons. They were less impacted by the COVID than traditional kind of stopped social distancing and all the rest of it. We were able to continue with the MMC and being able to work in factories and do that kind of stuff. So you can see there are some really good things. And I think we've accepted that we've had to adopt it. I suppose the downside for me has been that it's shown that our systems are lacking. You know, people are still, one day they're on Zoom, the next minute they're on Teams, then they're on Google, then they're on, and we have no single platform, and each one of them works slightly differently. We also see bandwidth at home has been severely compromised. And then for me, really, to move to MMC is the back office. You know, we've kind of left things like, especially payments and what goes on in the back office has been done by hand, you know, checks and all those kind of bits and pieces. We haven't embraced what I would call the technology where your plumber sends you on his iPhone the bill, which is then all the taxes done for it. We're still in construction a long way behind. And then there's the legacy for me, which is I'm doing a lot of work on the ACM cladding and taking off cladding of buildings, and I have no digital models of what it should look like. Well, I know what it was designed to look like, but then I take it off and there's been no checks. And so we've a long way to go in adoption. And I worry about legacy of all those thousands of buildings that we've got. 99% of our built infrastructure is there. You know, we have no records for it. Going forward, I can see new companies, you know, people coming in like Deltek and Henry Boot, they'll go forward and they'll keep it. But how do we go back to legacy? And it's really important that somehow we look at how we retrofit this stuff.
Thanks, David. Lydia, from your perspective at Costain, do you see it as a turning point over the past year in the way that companies approach adoption of new technology?
Yeah, so I definitely think the pandemic has forced us to think more innovatively and to adopt technology on a larger scale and faster than we would have done without it. And I think it's the small initiatives have actually had a big impact there. And it's funny that David mentioned sort of those back office invoicing and payment. So we've implemented RPA, so robotic process automation. And although it seems really minimal, we've been able to knock off up to 10 minutes per invoice in processing that. And when you scale that up to a much larger complex delivery project, that actually has a much larger impact than that seems initially. And we've had to do things like that because we haven't been able to go around and get physical signatures from people. So we've had to move to things like DocuSign to get those electronic signatures and go through the governance processes. But also when I mentioned there the innovation. So a couple of years ago, collaborative planning. So those sessions where you bring people in, clients, subcontractors, supply chain, to go through your program, that was seen as a really innovative initiative to bring everybody into the same room to do that. But we've, because of the pandemic, we've implemented an app where we can do that remotely. So people can still log on to the system, and it's still very much a collaborative process, but it's much more dynamic in the way that we run that now. So I think whereas apps and technology have been available, the pandemic has really made us, forced us to look more seriously at adopting those types of technologies. And I do think that's transforming the way that, that we're starting to operate.
You mentioned something about robots there. Can you say a little bit more about that?
RPA is robotic process automation. So it uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to look at that invoice, pick out the key elements, and rather than somebody sort of in admin going through that information, it just picks it up automatically, and that's how it can save time.
That sounds marvelous. I'm of the generation where I hear robots, I think C3PO. So, Nick, what's your take? I mean, obviously, from a technology provider, you're all for technology adoption, but what do you think the lessons of the past year are?
I think it's focused around the fact that there was this immediate need, and people kind of affected digital change by any means, and easy adoption of point solutions to give quick fixes to big problems. And then we see organizations becoming less afraid of change and speedier to adopt. So whether that's the surface stuff around conferencing and putting people together and networking that way, or then starting to look at their back end processes, I think the whole sort of pandemic position has really given the industry a wake-up call that it's been able to get on the back of very quickly and not put the barriers into it that maybe historically as an industry would have done. Deltek does a piece of research called a clarity report once a year, and we go across our user base, particularly in the AE sector. But I think there's some really strong parities here that we're seeing businesses saying that they maybe have a mature digital transformation model in their businesses, and that's about 20%, with the rest thinking, you know, that they're not far behind in the next 5 years. Well, that 18% this year was 9% last year. So it's jumped up as people have gone, yeah, we've got to get mature in the digital space because we need to empower and enact our businesses. And I think that's what's fascinating. And I love the idea that small changes make big differences, and whether that be process automation, whether that be ways of connecting sites up and changing the culture of a site so that people are using technology to get the best outcome, I think is the fascinating part of what's come out of the pandemic. The bottom line is businesses need to succeed, and if you can become competitive in a hard time and you survive a hard time, when markets loosen up and things become easier, then you've got an opportunity to flourish. And I think businesses have taken their time through the back of the pandemic stage as we are now, thinking about how they can enact that change more broadly, from those simple things they did initially to survive to giving themselves a platform to move on and grow.
Thanks, Nick. Let's move on a little. David, in your previous answer, you talked a little bit about the adoption of technology in the back office and things like that. Where do you think that the big wins are about where technology could really transform the way the business operates and perhaps improve efficiencies and improve profitability? Where do you think people should be looking?
So I do think payment. I think payment terms is really critical with the industry that we have, with so many SMEs who live on cash flow. I think it's important that there isn't a lag between when the client pays and when it gets down to the cash flow, down to the people at the bottom end. So I think there's an area. I think increasingly as we move into MMC and modern methods, where we're moving actually out of construction into manufacturing, that we look to people like BMW, who for their stock control, their logistics, just in time. We don't really do just in time in the construction industry. We do just in the week. Whereas if you look at any of the people that are delivering regularly, Tesco, Sainsbury's, the way they go, so stock control starts to become more important. And again, security around blockchain. We should be starting to move into the blockchain world where security of payment. It would also keep my colleagues happy in the tax, because if we had all the digital, we could ensure that people pay the right tax to HMRC at the right time. So I think that's really important. And if I can just answer a question from Kunite there, which is a really good question. By doing this, we'll allow new people to come into our industry because they're new jobs, drone flying in order to be able to work out how much of a building is complete, to be able to say, well, when do I pay? We'll allow people who haven't previously considered construction as where they might go to come in. And we'll also, not only will we allow better sort of diversity across genders, but we'll also allow people with who are perhaps not able to, with disabilities, because again, you can do stock control. If you're with blind people, using Braille. There's an awful lot of people that could be let into our industry by the adoption of digital technologies. And I think that would be better for our industry.
Thanks, David. Lydia, what's your perspective? Where do you see the big opportunities going forward for transforming the industry?
Yeah, it's such a broad question, really, because I just think there's huge potential. The construction industry is ripe for that transformation. And I just feel like we can realise those benefits. I've mentioned in my sort of introduction there about being safer, greener, faster and more efficient. And when you're asking that question, I was sort of thinking about autonomous plant and the drones and things that David mentioned there. But I feel like this all comes back to data and how you can use data insights on your contracts. So on a number of our contracts now, the A14, for example, that was actually delivered 8 months ahead of schedule. And a lot of the contributing factors to that was because of democratized data. So we persuaded people to stop using their own spreadsheets saved on their hard drives and actually share that data across the project and those joint venture partners. And that really enabled us to look at the program, commercial data, all those efficiencies, and use those insights to perform much better. So for me, if we can really harness that data, not just collect it, but use it in an efficient way, for me, that's where I really can see huge benefits going forward.
Thanks, Lydia. Craig, what's your perspective about where perhaps people who are watching this webinar, where should they be thinking about how technology could help them?
Yeah, a broad piece really, isn't it, Lev? And I think for me, there's probably three sort of tiers here I'm thinking about. And I think my view is that businesses should look to tailor their individual technology adoption process to improve business performance, their service and the industry. And I think they're connected, and I think there's a chronology there. There's a bit of a domino effect. So getting your house in order and securing that return on investment through technology is critical, and the whole concept of proving return on investment through technology is a tricky one in itself. I think there's a real drive in a lot of businesses to streamline and simplify and have some sort of one-stop shop system that runs the show. And I don't believe these exist, but I think there are some good systems out there which can facilitate functions, so CRM, supply chain management, account management, payments. What David was talking about there, and performance management. So this sort of integrated set of disciplines. And as part of Henry Boot Construction's digital transformation roadmap, we've gone through a full cycle of thinking to improve our business performance, and it is a journey. So we're gradually replacing self-developed bespoke systems which are quite disparate. We've rationalized and we've kept what's worked well and renewed areas of workflow that were ripe for improvement. We've blended off-the-shelf solutions with some homegrown stuff to get what we need to run our business sustainably and provide that service for hopefully another 135 years. But clients are looking for a service and not just a built asset. That's the key thing. So they're looking for a dynamic and enjoyable journey, and this design and construction journey that culminates in an asset that does what it says on the tin. So we're looking at commissions at the moment that extend well past post-occupancy, so that we need to be able to prove design intentions. So with that in mind, I think businesses need to be aware of technology and moreover, the skills to deliver that service. I'm thinking of creative stuff, so compelling visualizations and models, support design evolution and client engagement. And, you know, close to David's heart, the standardization and, you know, standardization models and off-site solutions which support improved safety on site, accelerated programs, and consistent levels of quality. Back to you, Len.
Thanks, Craig. Nick, what's your view? Where do you think the big opportunities lie?
I think we take a step back, and when we talk with our clients, one of the things we hear around their top challenges really is the cost of technology, full stop, and understanding how best to prioritize that spend, where there's the most opportunity, but knowing that unless you've got employee engagement and training, and you're bringing new people into the industry, then you're not going to broaden your capability. So it's a real mixed bag around how you focus your technology. And a model we use internally here at Deltek when we're thinking about use things around purposeful innovation is a concept of what if something was what it wanted to be. And we use that internally when we're thinking about developing product, but we're also seeing our clients starting to think this way. What if we could put our competitors and our clients and understand them more so we understand what they're driving? It's just not about building a structure, it's the experience of going for. What if we could have all the data in the right place to make the right decisions at the right time and reduce waste? We know productivity within construction is a big issue. And then really sort of moving forward and designing a technology set internally, and taking Craig's point here exactly, where, you know, taking best of breed when you can, integrating into other processes so that you get an overarching solution that is driving your business in the way that you want it, I think is really, really key. And understanding, therefore, the competitors that you're against and how your clients want to do business is really key to that. And we're seeing that. Whether it's taking brand new clever technologies, the blockchains, the automation, the machine learning, or just going back to simple things and doing them well and taking small efficiencies and grouping those together, we kind of see is where the next big challenge is and where we can drive forward.
Thanks, Nick. I'd like to pick up on one of the questions that came in earlier about whether technology can help to address diversity and think more broadly about the skills as well. Lydia, what's your view from Costain about how technology can perhaps broaden the appeal of construction?
Yeah, and I actually think it's a really exciting time for construction as it is evolving and transforming. I do already see different skill sets entering the industry. So on our contracts, it's not unusual now to see enterprise architects, systems engineers, social value and natural capital experts. And even when I entered the industry as a civil engineer, I didn't necessarily see my career going down the data and digital route. That wasn't something we really were taught about at university. So that diversity of skills is already changing. And I had to change my mindset. So I love construction, and without just seeing it as purely in the ground, concrete and steel, I had to change to a more of a digital mindset. So how can we improve those processes to make construction more efficient and actually keep us relevant for the future? So I think for people who are already in the industry, it is about having that digital mindset, and there are training schemes out there. Towards the end of this week, actually, the Supply Chain Academy and CITB are launching a digital mindset training for leadership program. So those types of things can really develop the skills that we have already. And we need to continue promoting construction as a progressive industry. As I said, that will enable us to attract new talent, develop those current skills, and make sure that we retain the talent that we already have in the industry as well. So I think it's a great time for improving diversity. Thanks,
Lydia. Craig, I wonder if you could address this question about skills and people and how they fit into the mix. And also, we had a question from James Barr watching today. He's saying culture eats strategy for breakfast. I think he's saying that if your culture doesn't change, then everything else that you plan is doomed to failure. How do you think technology affects that whole mix of skills and culture?
Yeah, well, look, this is quite close to my heart, really. As we look to create and maintain sustainable businesses, which are going through change pretty sharpish at the moment. So, for me, the image of the construction industry generally has been hard to road at grassroots and school level. So let's think back to sort of that stage. And I'm glad to hear that Lydia's getting some positive vibes from what she sees and out there in the marketplace. I think I observe some of the same things, but I think we've still got a lot more work to do in enhancing the image of construction as progressive, as exciting, as creative industry for people to develop careers. And as a mid-size regional construction business, I think that the traditional routes for hiring managers to go down conventional sourcing routes are just they're not there anymore necessarily for the new and emerging roles. I think the pandemic has opened their eyes that for certain office-based roles, particularly, hiring managers can cast the net wider geographically. And I must admit, our business's immediate reaction would have been to recruit someone within a commutable distance of site or the office. But particularly for the office roles now, is this a real requirement? The cat's out the bag. We can work across the country in different parts. I mean, attracting the talent is a challenge in itself. I boil that back down to impactful and accurate job descriptions and profiles on the right platforms to attract that wider, diverse audience, because the individuals looking for these new roles, emerging roles, and technology and creative roles are not necessarily looking in the places that the construction industry would traditionally advertise. And the job itself is not enough for the right talent. We're looking at the lifestyle, which includes a whole host of other benefits, including agile working, and that's a policy that Henry Boot's about to roll out. Well, I'll just wanted the developing this talent because of the new skills and the mentoring and the coaching piece becomes has a slightly different dynamic to it, and I think it's not going to follow necessarily the same traditional conventions of traditional development that a lot of businesses have adhered to. And I think that we're going to be relying on, yes, hardwired existing training catalogues, but there's definitely going to be some new ways of developing people in digital and technology.
Thanks, great.
Thanks, Len.
David, what's your view on this? I guess we're talking about the human dimension of technology adoption. What do you think are the important things to remember?
So, well, the first thing for me is what I call not analog adoption of digital, which is, they replace somebody's, notebook with an iPad, and they carry on doing things the same way. It is actually moving into a digital world where things are interconnected, where when you move something on your iPad or whatever, or if you put something physically on a building into a different place, it changes the diagrams for it and the backup to it. It is about really living in a digital world whereby, and it was mentioned earlier, where we have far more standard products than everything bespoke, where we have harmonization around it. If you look at the car industry, even though you can buy your car which you think is unique to you, it is made of standard components. It is made up of customizable, but from a menu. And we've got to get to that approach where we can actually start to buy off the shelf, so that allows more people to come in. If you've got an iPhone, if I make a cover for an iPhone, I don't have to make 23 different covers, one for every different, one for Balfour Beatty, one for Lang O'Rourke's. It might have a different logo on it, but the physical side of it is exactly the same. So we need to move towards a much more standardized industry for this to happen. we also need to harness those people, and I think somebody said get into schools early, and I don't mean universities, I mean getting into primary schools and secondary schools and telling people that if you come into the industry that you can have a digital career. I think professional institutions, the Institute of Civil Engineers, the Institute of Mechanical Engineers, have to start throwing their arms wider now to adopt people in that they may have not looked at in the past. Otherwise they'll die because people won't see them relevant. And then I think we've got to stop talking about construction and digital in two different. If you talk about manufacturing cannot exist without digital. It is hand in hand. You know, there is no digital part of manufacturing. It is just in time. All of the stock keeping, all of the way, you know, even in your pub, the way that when you run out of beer, it automatically tells the brewery that you need more, you know, more barrels to be delivered. It goes hand in hand, and I think we've got a move to make to be to that level where digital is just, we don't do anything. There isn't an analog way of doing things. You know, I still see, you know, people writing out checks or expecting checks, you know, and people, you know, probably don't remember them, but fax machines, you know, where you have to fax things in, you know, that's just archaic. When it all becomes an app on your phone, then you know that we're moving into a digital world. So I think we've got a long way to go. There are industries that are slightly ahead of us, like the car industry, and hence the research that we've teamed up with for the sector deal is out of Anstey with the Manufacturing Technology Centre. And we're asking a manufacturer, how would you construct? We haven't gone to a construction company and said, how would you manufacture? So yeah, I think as we move towards manufacturing, I think people will start to see that these changes will happen.
Indeed, yes. It's a great example. The car industry has invested a lot of effort in working out what things people care about and what they don't, so that they can standardize all the things that they don't care about. That's why a Skoda and a Volkswagen and an Audi are all the same thing under the skin, really. So, Nick, what's your view on this question of you know, the human interface with technology questions? What would your advice be for those people watching today?
I think for years we've been very focused on converting people to becoming digitally savvy, and I think where we've got to go forward now is actually making our organizations the home for digital natives. Those that have been brought up with digital at their fingertips and their expectation is there. The skills shortage we have in the industry is well understood and concerned and maybe impacted further by Brexit. But if a school leaver truly understands what being in construction is about, and that it is such a diverse church of activity, and it's just not about white van man anymore, it gives this opportunity to us to think about our technology. Because if you've got a choice of joining an organization that still has triplicate books and site diaries and old-fashioned digital cameras to take photographs, and that point of, yeah, we may be not doing paper, but we're doing tech, but only at the minimal of digital there, or you've got an environment, you're going to go and work for an organization that is end-to-end digital in the way it thinks about things, it empowers you to do your job, allows you to be effective and grow your career, then feet are going to go where the opportunity lies, surely. So as a technology provider, what we're looking at is about usability, is about getting the technology to be really focused on the tasks that are needed. Therefore, they can be easily adapted. Days are gone where you're going to want to pick people in the room and train them for hours and hours and hours to use a piece of tech. You need to pick it up. We've learned so much from the Play Stores of this world and how they adopt. And I think you're right. Being able to do your business on your phone with all the information in your hand to make the right decision at the right time is what's going to empower people. But that's how you deal with the cultural stuff. Just trying to headbutt against hard culture that says, oh, we don't do change, we do it like this, we've always done it like that, is where the construction has been. But if we are going to engage with digital natives, it can't be where it is.
Thanks, Nick. We've got quite a lot of questions to cover. We'll do our best. Craig, this one's been sent directly to you, so it simplifies the task of working out who to ask. It's a question from Samarth Satish asking, how do the question of digital adoption work across a supply chain? How do how do you approach that in terms of making sure that you're on the same page as your partners and suppliers and things like that?
No, it's a good question from Satish. I think there's not one answer to this one, because it's I think, to be fair, we've relied heavy and learned a lot from our supply chain. You know, it's that the information has been going both ways, and the adoption of our in fact, our digital transformation program has been heavily influenced by what our supply chain are doing and what they're learning. So I think there isn't so much of a blocker going through the supply chain. And when I talk about supply chain, I'm thinking holistically here, okay? So I'm thinking not just about our subcontract partnerships. I'm also talking about our design and professional team partnerships. So I think as an integrated team, and I love to use this word integrated, because, you know, we are, only as good as our supply chain, which is why we're investing heavily in engagements, early engagements, to de-risk contracts, improve cost and program surety. And that goes as far, I'll get, a recent example on MMC, which has part influenced our business strategy, is actually learning from our supply chain who operate within the MMC environment, within the factory build environment, actually influencing some of Henry Boot's design solutions and adoption of technology. So I think, Lem, and hopefully that's answered to Satish's question, but it is a two-way street for sure.
Thanks very much. Great. Lydia, interesting question here addressing the question of quality. I wonder, from your perspective at Costain, whether you have a view on perhaps how technology is helping deliver superior quality, and perhaps how I think one of the things we're seeing is perhaps more preparation, more planning going into delivery, and less sort of fixing problems on site. What's your view?
I've actually got a great example of that, and I think quality is really closely linked with safety as well. If you have a high quality project, it's very likely that the safety comes hand in hand with that. What we've been looking at more is 4D BIM and doing 4D BIM rehearsals. So the example I was thinking of there is on the A19, we had to install a gantry between two power lines, and that had to be done right first time. There was no margin for error there. So the teams did that 4D BIM rehearsal, and obviously the 4D element of that is time. So we could brief the teams exactly where they needed to be, where the cranes need to be set up, sort of to the nth degree before that happened. And the teams were actually managed to open the carriageway 2 hours early. So that there goes back to my quality and safety. It was a quality install because of that 4D rehearsal, and enhanced the safety both for the workers doing the install and the drivers on the carriageway. So yes, I think that's a good area for it.
Thanks, Lydia. Nick, I'm sure you have a view on this question of quality and how technology can contribute to that. I mean, it's a perennial problem for the industry, isn't it, getting things right first time?
Yeah, I think one of the mantras here has to be the right information at the right time to make the right decision. Rework is so costly, as we understand. Certainly, if we look at project information management and the area of the product set I looked after, our whole view of the world is giving you the one place of truth so that you can make your decisions based off the right information, because then you know what you're judging against. It's difficult to know whether you've done a quality job if the information that you've based it upon is sketchy or has changed or has not been tracked through. So I think information management and using that as a tool to de-risk processes is really important. But it's also about driving change and understanding the stages of change, the process management that sits alongside it, which is why Lydia's example of 4D is really strong, because you've worked the process of what you're going to do on site, but also you've planned that up front. And we've got a particular client that specializes in very fast turnaround works. They'll plan for 3 or 4 months to deliver something in 3/4 of an hour, because knowing that planning up front gives them that opportunity. Therefore, coming back to whether it's quality, whether it's safety, whether it's environmental impacts, having the right information, thinking about it in the right time, and then executing first time right, I think, is the key to it.
Thanks, Nick. David, I wonder if you have a view on either of those topics that we've heard from just recently about the supply chain interaction and how that works across the board, or this question of quality and making sure that we get things right.
So quality is quite important, and again, with MMC, if you have standardized products, that they fit together, then you end up with a quality product overall. So one of the things, if we look at what we did, everybody talks about the Nightingale hospitals. We didn't actually build the hospital, we fitted it out. But we fitted it out because we already had these things called repeatable rooms. So a repeatable room for an operation, we could just do it over and over again. And we knew it worked because we'd done pilots with it. Again, if you think about the automotive industry, when they bring out a new car, they test it before everybody gets it. And they put those things right, they get people in it. And so again, if we move especially the kind of thing we're doing in schools, for instance, we have schools whereby we're on our 4th generation that we've learned going through. And there's no reason that a school in Huddersfield or a classroom in Huddersfield should be any different to a classroom in Hammersmith. You might put those blocks together in a different way, like Lego. You might clad it in something as long as it's not flammable. But the whole concept would be that you would know things work together. You would know that your shower head works with your shower tray. A lot of snagging is for basic things, which is, that A doesn't go with B. So again, by having digital libraries and catalogs, it would say this doesn't go with that. The golden thread has been well known. I mean, Dame Judith in all her reports has talked about it, which is, another question on there is about the ACM cladding. It would have helped if I'd known what was on every building. We didn't know everything that was on there. And yet with digital technology, there is no reason we couldn't do it. I couldn't do a check and says, tell me everything which has got ACM cladding on. And it would tell me every building, what color it was and all those things. We don't have that yet. We don't have that catalog. It would also then, if we had digitization, it would also show me what it is and what's actually been built there, rather than when I take a panel off, I go, oh, well, that wasn't quite what I was expecting. There's a whole lot that digital can do on the quality. I've seen, with these head displays where they show you where to put the bricks in a very complex structure, and it'll fit it in there and it'll go green when you've got the panel or whatever in the right place. It's endless what can be done. I guess the clever thing is working out what is cost effective, because it isn't cost effective everywhere to have everything digitized. The other thing is we're not going to do, the industry isn't going to go completely to manufacturing. There will be trades, I've got Buckingham Palace to be upgraded and the Palace of Westminster. I need people that can do wet trades. I need old trades for people to do stonemasonry. So we're not talking about digital replacing skilled tradesmen. I think there is a need for both. So we shouldn't feel threatened. You can do anything going forward with the amount of work that we've got on. And I don't think people should feel threatened by digital. I think they should, it's not either or. It's plus.
Well, thank you very much, David. I think that's a nice positive note to end on. We are out of time, I'm afraid. All that remains for me to say is thank you very much to our panel. It's been a fascinating discussion from my perspective. I hope you've enjoyed participating as well. So thanks very much for your participation. Thanks very much for Deltek sponsoring today's event. And most of all, to everyone who's watched and submitted questions, I apologise if we didn't get round to your question in particular, but thanks very much for watching from all of us here. Goodbye.